Hey everyone, welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to break down 30 medical facts that sound completely, absolutely fake, but are actually 100% true. Today we aren't just doing trivia, we are getting into exactly why our basic, everyday understanding of human anatomy is so often completely wrong. Let's be real, most of us walk around with a fundamentally flawed view of how our own bodies actually operate, basically relying on old playground rumors or just completely outdated science. But today, all of that changes. All right, let's dive right into this challenge. I want you to actively keep track of your score as we go through this explainer. Seriously, count how many of these 30 facts you actually knew beforehand, because I promise you, some of these are going to sound completely made up, and by the end, you might realize you don't know your own body nearly as well as you thought you did. Section 1. Blood, bones, and veins, the static body illusion. So, we often fall for anatomy myths because we tend to think our bodies are just unchanging static machines, right? Built once and left to run until they eventually wear down. Well, let's test that visual illusion right now. Go ahead and look down at your wrists for a second. You might see what looks like little blue pathways just under your skin. Based on that visual evidence alone, you'd probably guess that the blood returning to your heart is blue. And that brings us to our very first major medical myth. Here's the deal. Your blood is absolutely never blue. It is always red. Whether it's completely loaded with oxygen or totally depleted of it, human blood remains strictly red. That bluish illusion you're seeing on your wrist, it literally just comes from the way light interacts with your skin and surrounding tissues before it bounces back to your eyes. It is an optical trick, not a biological reality. And, this perfectly illustrates another deep-seated misconception. We kind of think of our bones like the wooden frame of a house, right? Hard, dry, and just sitting there holding things up. But your skeleton isn't an inert frame at all. The reality is that your bones are packed with living cells. They are highly active tissues constantly being broken down and completely rebuilt throughout your entire life. You are essentially carrying around a structural support system that is continuously renovating itself day in and day out. Let's rapid-fire build on this dynamic system. When we say healthy bone is actively rebuilt, we're talking about incredible engineering. Pound for pound, healthy bone can actually be stronger than some types of steel. And inside that incredibly strong structure, your bone marrow is acting like a constant 24/7 blood cell factory, just relentlessly pumping out new red blood cells. Oh, and those new cells travel through a vascular network that is so unbelievably vast. If you took all your blood vessels and laid them end to end, they would stretch so far they could wrap completely around the globe multiple times. No way, right? To push all those freshly manufactured cells through that impossibly long network, your heart has to put in some serious work. It beats roughly 100,000 times a day. To put that into perspective, that translates to about 35 million heartbeats in a single year, and you don't even have to think about most of them. Here is a truly mind-bending fact about that powerhouse organ. Under the exact right laboratory conditions, as long as it gets the necessary oxygen and nutrients, a human heart can literally continue beating completely outside of your body. Moving on to Section 2, muscles, heat, and senses, the subconscious engine. Let's see how this builds into these subconscious engines running in the background of our lives. Growing up, your parents probably told you over and over to wear a hat in the winter for one very specific reason. We've all heard it, but let's actually test that knowledge against reality. Now, what's really fascinating here is the contrast between what we're told and what's actually true. Yes, of course, you can definitely lose heat through your exposed head on a freezing day. However, it isn't magically responsible for most of your body's heat loss. I mean, think about it. If you walked outside in a blizzard wearing a warm hat but absolutely no pants, you're going to lose plenty of heat everywhere else. The reality is your body temperature simply varies slightly across different parts of your body. There's no special thermal funnel just sitting at the top of your skull. And while we're busting playground myths, what about your tongue? Despite what you may have confidently heard in middle school science class, your tongue is actually not the strongest muscle in the human body. It is a remarkably flexible and incredibly useful group of muscles, sure, but crowning it the absolute strongest is just another super popular medical myth that simply fails under scrutiny. Right this very second, while you're sitting there watching this, your body is running a whole series of incredible subconscious systems. Without you pushing a single button, your eyes are blinking thousands of times today just to maintain moisture. Tonight, when you finally fall asleep, your ears won't turn off. Your brain will just keep right on processing sounds in the background. Right now, your nose is equipped to detect an enormous variety of complex smells, and it instantly connects them to deep emotional memories. If you get a chill, tiny little muscles attached to your hair follicles will suddenly contract, boom, goosebumps. And if a threat enters your system, your body will instinctively produce a fever as a highly calculated immune response to fight off the infection. Section 3. The useless organs myth and bizarre proportions. Still keeping track of your score? Good, because the anatomy facts get even stranger when we look at our bizarre biological proportions and our so-called useless organs. For decades, we confidently assumed the appendix was just a ticking time bomb, a completely useless evolutionary leftover just waiting to get infected and burst. But science is always updating, right? Researchers now believe this supposedly useless little pouch actually plays a vital role in regulating your immune system and acting as a safe house for your crucial gut microbiome. It turns out nature doesn't keep useless things around quite as often as we assume it does. Your body is just absolutely packed with these bizarre quirks. Take your brain, for example. It is the grand central station for processing every bit of your pain, yet brain tissue itself has absolutely zero pain receptors. It quite literally cannot feel pain. Furthermore, you aren't even perfectly symmetrical on the inside. Your left lung is actually slightly smaller than your right lung, actively shrinking its capacity just to make room for your heart. And then there's the naming of our parts. We call it the small intestine, but it is literally several meters long. Meanwhile, your skin, which we almost never think of as an organ, is officially your body's largest organ. Even something as delicate as your eyelashes isn't just there for aesthetics. They function as a highly evolved biological shield against airborne dust and particles. Which brings us to Section 4, a constantly renewing machine. So, this brings us to the absolute ultimate reason why so many of these common anatomy myths completely fail. It's because we just wildly underestimate the sheer scale of our internal turnover. When you look at our daily biological output, it's staggering. Every single day, without fail, you produce around a liter or more of saliva. Your kidneys, they act as a heavy-duty water treatment plant, filtering massive amounts of blood every single day while cleverly reabsorbing most of the water, so you only produce a tiny fraction of it as waste. And your digestive system isn't just a hollow tube, it's a sprawling metropolis hosting trillions of living microorganisms that you actually rely on to survive. Because of all this massive internal workload, you are in a state of constant, non-stop regeneration. The harsh acids in your stomach are so intensely strong that your stomach has to literally grow a brand new lining roughly every few days just so it doesn't digest itself. Your liver is so incredibly resilient that it can aggressively regenerate itself even after losing a huge chunk of its tissue. And as you walk around your house right now, you are literally leaving tiny pieces of yourself behind, like a trail of breadcrumbs, as your body constantly sheds dead skin cells. In fact, one of the only physical traits that remains truly fixed are your fingerprints, which are completely unique to you and actually began their development long before you were even born. And this perfectly illustrates the core truth of this explainer. Anatomy myths fail because they treat you like a finished product. They treat you like a static, boring machine that gets built once and then just slowly wears down over time. But when we look at the hard facts, the reality is far more poetic and honestly, way more incredible. You are continuously repairing, rebuilding, and renewing yourself. On a cellular level, you are constantly replacing parts everywhere. And here is the absolute craziest part to think about. Every single one of these regenerative, dynamic processes is happening inside of you right this very second, while you sit there watching this explainer. So out of those 30 bizarre medical facts, what was your actual score? How many did you really know? And knowing that you are quite literally not the exact same physical person you were when we first started this explainer just a few minutes ago. Are you ready to explore even stranger biology next time? Keep learning, and I'll see you in the next explainer.